Hello and welcome to another Tri-tutors video. In today's video we're going to be unpacking some skills regarding the section of comprehension in your exam, and we're also going to take a look at some past paper questions and see how these skills actually help in a practical exam. So firstly, what should we be aware of when we are approaching a comprehension? Well, we need to be thinking of what is the marker testing and what is the marker looking for in the answers. If you step into the marker's shoes when you are answering your comprehension questions, it's really going to be to your advantage because you're going to see where the marker wants to allocate the marks and whether you've met that criteria. You should also be aware of your mark allocations. If it's 3 marks, if it's 2 marks, that needs to guide your answer, it needs to guide your explanation. You also need to be aware of whether you should be writing in your own words or whether you should be using quotes based on the cues in the question. And then you also need to be aware of whether you need to be using your own opinions or the information from the text. And usually for comprehension, they are looking at the information from the text because the idea behind comprehension, what the mark is looking for is, has the student comprehended the information that has been given? So you have to be very careful not to state your own opinion when they're asking you a textual question. And often there's just 1 or 2 questions towards the end of the section where they ask your opinion, but your opinion is also based on what you've read in the text. So what you should think about before actually answering your questions. You need to be thinking back to those mark allocations, and you need to decide how many facts do I need in this question to get the full amount of allocated marks. I need to be thinking, what are the key words in the question? I should also be thinking, which paragraph does the question refer to? And they often put that in the question, but sometimes we ignore it and we forget that they've told us to refer to paragraph 2, and then we explain something from paragraph 3. So before you answer the question, just make sure that you've looked and you've double checked that you're looking in the right paragraph. And then you also need to be thinking, what is the question word being used? Did they ask how, or did they ask why, or did they ask evaluate, or did they ask assess? Or did they ask determine? All of these different words have different meanings and they require different styles of answers. So what should you actually write? And we're going to go through this in the next slide in more detail, but just some general things to think about. Use the words of the question to guide your answer. Write according to the mark allocation. Always write in full sentences, especially in comprehension. Remember, your marker is an English teacher. They're going to appreciate full sentences. You want to mark so that they're happy with your answer and they want to give you the marks that you deserve. And the last thing is, imagine you are writing to someone who has not seen the question paper or the text. So imagine that your marker is looking at your answer book and they are sort of blind to what the text actually says and what the question is. And by the end of reading your answer, it must be clear to them what the question was and what the text was about based on your answer. So that's something like a little trick to think about, is if you've answered the question properly, then it's going to be very clear if your answer reflects what the question originally was. So here is my recommendation. Now, obviously, different people approach comprehensions in different ways, and so if you found a way that works for you, go for it. If you're struggling to, find that approach, then hopefully this can help you. So the first thing I would do when getting my comprehension is, for me, during reading time, I would read my comprehension. I would try and get a general idea of what it's about. And then when I go to my questions, before I answer my questions, I need to make sure that my question paper is full of highlighting and full of circling, because I need to see, well, for me, I need to engage with the question before I can actually answer it properly. So my advice would be to go and circle or highlight the keywords in the question and break it down into mini questions. And I'm going to show you that in an example on the next slide. But you break down, especially those 3 and 4 mark questions, they can sometimes be overwhelming. So circle your keywords. What are they asking? Decide what they are asking in the question and break it down into little pieces that you can answer. Use the words of the question to guide your answer. So this links back to what I said on the previous slide regarding making sure that through your answer the question is understood. So if the question says, how is the message conveyed through the diction? You use the words of the question. You can say, the message is da 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 da, the diction is da 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 da. This is not an essay. This is an exercise in comprehending the information and articulating the information. So if it's easier to use the words of the question and to guide the marker exactly where you're going with your response, then do that. You're not getting marks in comprehension for the fluency of your writing or the subtlety with which you use diction. You are getting the marks according to the facts that you're providing. Define each part of the question and provide evidence in the form of short quotes. So if you listen to what I've said in terms of using the words of the question to guide your answer, you're essentially going to be defining, in inverted commas, each part of the question. So if it says, how is the message conveyed through the diction? You are saying the message is, the diction is. You are defining each aspect of that question. And so then you're going to get your marks easily. Now, for a 3-mark question, it's sometimes quite nice to put a short quote in from the text to show that you are using the information from the text and you're not just coming up with your own ideas. But a very important thing is you don't want to just quote as your entire answer, because that is showing me absolutely nothing. It's not showing the marker that you've understood anything. So you need to provide a short quote, but then you need to explain your quotes using your own words, because the marker is looking to see whether you have comprehended the information. They're not looking to see if you can copy from the text. They're looking to see have you comprehended. So you can use a short quote, put it in inverted commas, but then make sure that you explain it. Take note of the mark allocations and write accordingly. If it's 2 marks, you want at least 2 sentences. 3 marks, 3 sentences. 4 marks, 4 to 5 sentences. This is very important in terms of some people are underwriters, so they will only write 1 sentence for 3 marks, and there's no possible way you can get 3 marks in 1 sentence. But it's also important for those overwriters out there, because if it's 2 marks and you're writing 4 sentences or 5 sentences, then you are going to run out of time. So you need to ensure that you contain yourself, and if it is only 2 marks, you only write 2, maximum 3 sentences, so that you can ensure that you complete the paper in time. Sometimes with the comprehension, people get fixated on the details, and they find a little detail or they find a word that they don't understand, and then they feel like they can't do any of the comprehension questions because, well, they don't understand that particular detail. My advice would be to understand what the main message and theme of the comprehension is. So take your reading time and read that comprehension once over, maybe twice over, and get in your head, what is the main message? What is the main theme of this? Is it about climate change? Is it for climate change? Is it against climate change? Just simple things like that. And that's going to keep you focused and on the lookout for how this message is being portrayed. And that's ultimately what the questions are going to be based around. Remember, there's typically maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs that go against this main message, and that's the counter argument. So look out for those. Is there a counter argument? Is there not a counter argument? But understanding the main message of the text, which hint can often be deduced from the title, is going to allow you to focus on the techniques and not on the details that maybe you don't understand. But focusing on the main message is going to help you answer the questions accurately. Always remember that a text is positioning you to believe something. And the ways in which they position you to believe something include things like pronoun usage, diction, sentence structure, paragraph length, punctuation. So always be aware that you are being manipulated. This refers to comprehensions and adverts and cartoons. They are always positioning you to believe something. So make sure you understand how they are positioning you to believe that main message or that main theme. When answering your questions, and this applies to comprehensions and visual literacy, which includes your advert and your cartoon, remember to combine the theory and the practical application. So for example, if they ask you what is the effect of the use of the rhetorical question, now that's a question that, theoretically a rhetorical question always engages with the reader. So you write it engages with the reader, or it makes the reader think, but that's the theoretical part. You need to actually apply it to what's being spoken about in the text. So you need to say, the rhetorical question makes the reader think about the dangers of climate change. So once again, going back to that idea of the marker doesn't have the text in front of them, you need to ensure that when you have those theory questions, like what is the effect of the rhetorical question, that you combine your theoretical knowledge with the practical application to this particular text. Answer each part of the question and circle where the marks are coming from. So you circle your keywords in the question, and I'm going to show you an example and it's going to make more sense, but understand where your marks are coming from, and then you can answer these sorts of mini questions within this 3 or 4 mark framework. And from there you can put yourself in the marker's shoes and you can read back your answer and say, oh yes, okay, I am going to get 3 out of 3 because I've got 3 particular points. I've unpacked every part of the question. And then remember, whenever they ask you what is the effect of something, or what's the effectiveness, or to comment on the use of something, it's usually to emphasize. But you can't just say to emphasize. You need to be specific as to what it's emphasizing. So how is the diction used effectively? You would explain what the diction is, you define what the diction is, explain it, and you could say the diction emphasizes the tone of, and you actually have to be specific about what that tone is or the message of, and explain that message clearly. So on the screen here I have the questions from the November 2021 DBE grade 12 paper. So you can have a look, and I've got the links on the next slide where you can actually find the comprehension, the questions, and the memo. But I want to unpack the questions with you, and unfortunately the memo doesn't really show you exactly where each mark comes from in some of the cases. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but I want to show you how I would actually unpack each of these questions and how I would go about answering them. So I'm not actually going to answer them, I'm going to show you how to approach them, and then my advice would be to try to do the paper yourself, and then you can check if you're on the right track in terms of the content. So 1.1 said, what message does the writer convey in the first sentence for 2 marks? So I need to see, where am I going to get my 2 marks? Well, my first mark is going to be actually telling you something about the first sentence, and my second mark is going to come from the message. So this is something that could be put together, and maybe I could just find 2 different messages from the text, or I can explain the first sentence really well in my own words, and then tell the marker what the message is, what I've got from that first sentence, from the explanation, what the message is. And I can use the words of the question. The first sentence is about da-da-da-da. The message the writer conveys is da-da-da-da. And then I have 2 marks. So 2 marks for 2 sentences for unpacking 2 different aspects of the question. 1.2. What does trading playground insults reveal about the writer's attitude towards powerful politicians? So here you need to unpack what trading playground insults suggests, what it means, and then you need to actually define what the writer's attitude is. So is the attitude dismissive? Is it optimistic? You need to find an attitude word, and attitude is a synonym for tone, which means that you need to use an adjective to actually describe what this attitude might be. So unpack what trading playground insults, what a playground insult is, and then tell me what the writer's attitude is. And then you're going to get 2 marks. Refer to paragraph 2. Discuss the importance of mentioning the participants in various protests. So this is a pure content question. There's nothing theoretical about it. It's just based on your understanding. But go back to paragraph 2, because I said refer to paragraph 2, and please reread paragraph 2, and then you'll be able to answer this in an easier fashion, because paragraph 2 is actually going to explain this. So you need to unpack what it means that participants are in various protests, and then you need to say what the importance is. And so the importance here would probably be to emphasize something, to emphasize what the writer is trying to say. And so I would write there, the importance is to emphasize what the writer is trying to communicate in the message, which is, and I tell you the exact message of the text. 1.4, so here's our first 3-mark question. Refer to paragraphs 3 and 4. What are the implications of referring to humankind as a child and an adolescent? So this is a very important question to understand where the marks are coming from. So you need to first establish what it means to refer to something as a child and an adolescent. So maybe I would say a child and an adolescent would connote, yes, it would suggest, and I'd write a sentence about what it means to be a child and to be an adolescent. And then for 2 marks, I need to explain the implications of that in regard to humankind. But firstly, you have to unpack what a child and an adolescent, what that connotes, what that means, what that signifies. 1.5. How does the writer use diction in paragraph 5 to convey his message? So this is one of those questions that I think a lot of students dread, but I would actually say it's one of the best questions you can get, because it is something that comes up in every single paper, so you can be prepared for it. It's 3 marks, and it's quite simple in terms of how you need to unpack this. Firstly, you need to unpack the diction. Diction is the choice of words. So you need to go and find a single word or maximum 2 or 3 words. But really, diction is about the use of a particular word and the connotations, the implications of that particular word. You need to quote the word and you need to explain what the connotations of the word are. What are the associated meanings of that word? You do that in your first sentence. And to be safe, I would do 2 words. I'd unpack 2 words. Then I would say in my next sentence, the message is, what is the writer's message in paragraph 5? And then lastly, how does the diction convey the message? I would say the diction conveys the message by emphasizing the something characteristic. And there's your 3 marks. 1.6. Comment on the writer's tone in paragraph 6 with close reference to the text. Alright, so this one is it's quite similar to 1.5. It's quite theoretical, but you have to apply to the practical. So over here, you need to define what the writer's tone is, and remember we said this is an adjective, so you need to say the writer's tone is conversational, or it is scathing, or it is optimistic, whatever it might be. And then it's that close reference to the text. Close reference to the text means you need to quote and explain from paragraph 6. So I would say what my tone was, then I would say what the close reference to the text is, and then I would make a comment about it. So I need to make a critical argument as to how this tone and the text link together. So I could use perhaps my favorite word, emphasize again. So I could say how this idea emphasizes the writer's tone, or the tone emphasizes this idea in this way. Skipping to 1.11. To what extent does text B reinforce the ideas expressed in paragraph 7 of text A, motivate your response? So this is an important one because this is our intertextual question, and you always are going to get an intertextual question for 4 marks at the end, and it links text A and text B together. Remember, they're not going to give you a text B that has nothing to do with text A. There is always a connection. So my advice would be always to show the connection, always to show the similarity, because there is going to be some sort of similarity between them. It might be a different take on the issue, but it's the same issue that's being expressed. You have to remember to unpack the 4 marks. So where are you going to get your 4 marks from? So firstly, I would unpack text B. So what is text B about for 1 mark? Then I would unpack paragraph 7 of text A and explain what that's all about. And make sure that those explanations link together. Then I would make sure to give at least something from text B, some quote or some mention of the picture. And the same with paragraph 7 of text A, some little quote with an explanation. I would, in my head, put half and half a mark and half a mark for each of those. And then my last mark would come from the motivation of my response. And here I have to give a logical reason as to why the one reinforces the other, why they support each other, why they are the same. I hope that has been helpful. It's just a little taste of my approach in terms of how to get through a comprehension, how to achieve in a comprehension. Remember, as much as comprehension is about the text itself and understanding the text, there is a lot of preparation that you can do in terms of, what is tone, what is juxtaposition, what is diction. So making sure you understand those terms before you go into the comprehension, before you go into the exam. Remember to trust your interpretation of the text and to trust your understanding of the questions, and most importantly, to ascertain where you're going to get your marks and go according to your mark allocations. I hope that has been helpful. I'll see you in the next video.